It's a joy to see so many of you here this morning. Many of you I haven't seen in a year, face to face or more. Back when the pandemic started just over a year ago and canceled our in-person worship services, we thought it might just be a few weeks, and that surely we'd be back in time for Easter, with the trilling trumpets and fragrant flowers and everyone wearing their best springtime attire, like Norma's hat, which she had 2 years ago, ready for this occasion. And when that date came and went, with increasing anxiety and palpable fear, we said to comfort ourselves, well, we'll just celebrate Easter in June when it's safe. And when June came and went, well, here we are, and it's finally Easter. And yet, it's not quite like the Easters we remember. I mean, in previous years, you didn't have to consider what kind of mask you'd wear and would it match your outfit, right? I realize that for many of you, this may be the first time that you've gone to church in a year. So after one colossally difficult year, all of the changes and the worries make this Easter different. Makes us ponder questions, mysteries like Jessica talked about, without seeming answers, as we're forced to rethink again what our lives are all about. In church terms, Easter Sunday embodies success. It's the main event. Larger attendance, special music, springtime optimism, and attire. But this Easter, I've been thinking a lot about success. What is success? What do you imagine success to be? If I were to give you some crayons from the children's card and a piece of paper and to ask you to draw success, what would you draw? What does success look like? Is it a tiny umbrella in a tropical drink on a paradise island? Is it a man in a business suit with a flush wallet and a growing investment portfolio? Is it a brand new car with those all-imported heated seats and remote start? We do live in Western New York, and it's probably going to snow tomorrow. Maybe it's just a crowded kitchen table filled with delicious food and children and grandchildren laughing and enjoying life together. Whatever image came to your mind, I would guess that the element that helps you define it as successful is probably a connection to abundance, more. Whether it's abundance of resources, stuff, or money, abundance of experiences, abundance of status, or abundance of relationships. We tend to think that if a little's good, well, a whole lot's better, right? That is the American way. Indeed, it's what an Easter morning is all about. Increased numbers of people at church, beautiful flowers, triumphant music, and those wonderful family dinners. By anyone's measure, success has been missing, all too absent from our lives this past year. Believe me, success has been redefined merely as survival. Not getting sick or getting someone else sick with the coronavirus, somehow getting the children through school in this weird hybrid reality while trying to get your job done in the meantime. Or maybe you're one of those whose success is surviving the guilt of not being all that much affected by the pandemic, while others are dying or struggling to pay their rent. So what does success look like on this Easter morning, when even survival isn't an option? I mean, today's gospel story leaves us with a whole lot of ambiguity and anxiety and fear. The story of the discovery of an empty tomb is a story that I think we're living in the current moment. It's our story. Even as life begins to resume a bit of normality, we're discovering that returning to those old patterns of our lives may not bring us the joy, certitude, or comfort that they once did. In their place, we may discover a certain vacuity or even a rather large void, like a saddened child who opens the Easter egg only to find no candy. Jessica, tell me you put candy in the eggs, didn't you? Well, if it's a mystery, we'll have to find out. Last Easter, we thought that not being able to gather together was the empty tomb experience. This year, the empty tomb experience is coming back together, still under the shadow of the pandemic, still grieving, still wondering, realizing that certainty may be gone forever. Yes, we want to get back to celebrating. And yet what occupies our attention is just the uncertainty of the unknown. After a year of wondering when the other shoe will drop, we still find ourselves wondering, when will the effects of the pandemic dissolve your career prospects? When will your savings run out? When will the financial markets fail? When will those college debts come to roost? And what to do with those dashed teenage dreams from the kids in your lives? So what does real success look like now? What should we expect? I don't know if you saw the film City Slickers, but I remember watching the 1991 classic with my parents as a teenager, shortly after it came out. Back on a thing called VHS. I don't know if anyone remembers. Maddie wouldn't know what that is. VHS? Oh, okay. The lead character is played by Billy Crystal, who's a successful advertising executive in Manhattan. And while life is going well, he's just not satisfied with his job or content with things the way they are. He's got plenty of money, but at 39 years old, he's realizing that he may be approaching a midlife crisis, where it all seems empty, like that tomb. So he connects with some lifelong friends, and they go on a testosterone-infused, Wild Western ranching experience to reclaim the simplicity of success and perhaps their manhood or something like that. Well, comedy ensues as they learn to confidently ride a horse. They are simultaneously beguiled and intimidated by their real-life, hard-as-nail cowboy guide named Curly, played by Jack Palance. And there's one famous scene where Billy Crystal character rides up to Curly and confesses that he's feeling a tad lost in life despite his success. Curly finishes his hand-rolled cigarette, flicks it to the ground, and he stares at Crystal, hard-eyed. "Do you know what the secret to life is?" he says. Pregnant pause. And then he holds up a black-gloved finger. Billy Crystal, being Billy Crystal, says, "Your finger?" "It's just one thing. It's just one thing," Curly says. "You stick to that one thing, and the rest just don't matter." Well, I'm paraphrasing a bit. He says a word that I'm not going to say on Easter morning, although I'd likely say it any other Sunday. But Crystal's character is intrigued. "Well, what's the one thing?" he says. Curly says, "That's for you to discover," and then rides off. The rest of the film focuses on this discovery, especially after Curly dies, and they have to figure out what to do with his body. It's a really nice scene, but I think Curly's wrong. I think the real secret to life is not this, but I think it's this. This. What do I mean? The zero. I think our current moment is more attuned to the reality and the power of the zero than the abundance of stuff. I know when we see a zero, we're not too excited or impressed, unless there's a whole series of zeros with a one out in front. Then we're excited. But there's great creative power in the zero. It's been said, if you look at a zero, you see nothing. But if you look through it, you see the whole world. I think that's true. On this Easter morning, we see that opening of the tomb, that empty tomb, and it too looks like a zero. It too looks like an Easter egg. It's easy to see the terror of the tomb as a negation, as a nothing, as death, much like the first women discovered it. But what if the emptiness was really about something else? Not about nothing, but about something. What if the point is the sheer pregnancy of possibility created by its emptiness? That's the argument that mathematician Robert Kaplan makes in his book, The Nothing That Is, The Natural History of Zero, which I recently discovered. He tells the story of the discovery of zero by the ancient Sumerians some 5,000 years ago, and indeed all the fear that has caused since then. Originally, zero was just a placeholder so that they could create a decimal system and basically have a quicker bookkeeping. It's what helped them create the abacus. But zero was still just a placeholder. It was a placeholder for thousands of years more, until we discovered that maybe zero had some real possibility. Indeed, it was the 7th century when an Arabic scholar discovered that zero was in fact a number. It was a something and not a nothing. Then the womb of possibility emerged out of that empty space. Too often, we look at the empty tomb, at the zero, at those of little account, and see nothing. But God doesn't. God looks at the empty spaces, the empty tombs, the broken patterns of our lives, those empty, vacuous places, and sees possibility, sees potential. The point is not success or survival. The point is resurrection. The point is that failures and death can be remade into life. That's what this mystery is about. That's what this story is all about. What does success look like? It looks like zero. The zero of possibility. The zero of new life. The circle that represents for us all that eternity means. I wonder, where is the fear of zero in your life this morning? What is causing you to flee from the tomb in fear and amazement? What feels like a total failure in your life right now? The story of the resurrection invites us to not see it as a failure, but as a zero of possibility. Can you sit with that empty space, that void, painful as it is? Can you be present to it? What Easter morning is all about is finding the possibility of the zero, finding the resurrection power that Christ instills in our lives. That's how we live out this Christian story. The resurrection, if it was an event that happened 2,000 years ago and we can't find it today, it's meaningless. Resurrection happens now in our lives, in the empty tombs of our hearts, in the places of frustration, the places of anguish, and the places of death in our lives. But if we run from them, we won't find it. I invite you to let God work through the failures, the frustrations, the worries, the anxiety that reside in your heart today, that you may find God's resurrecting power. God will raise you up. As sure as those flowering trees are about to flower, as sure as the bulbs are pushing their way up already, God's resurrection is here and it's present. Open your eyes and see it, and then tell someone else. Happy Easter. Amen.
Amen.